There's a YouTube video called "Fan with Sign Causes Huge Pile Up in Stage 1 of the Tour de France." And it is, I watched it over and over. For people that don't know, there was a woman was trying to get a photo of the Tour de France. And I think what she was aiming for was she had a sign that she was trying to lean in and get someone to photograph, so it would be the photographer, and then down the road her, and then down the road the cyclists. And she mistimed it, and her back is to the cyclists, and she's out in the road, and a cyclist clips her and falls, at which point the cyclist behind him runs into his head and falls, at which point
they're clustered.
Hundreds of
within
cyclists.
Arm's reach. They could all just hold each other's hands for, 200 feet of just wall-to-wall cyclists.
Yeah, I don't really have a takeaway, but if anyone hasn't seen it, it's wild to watch. She takes down 100 professional cyclists in the biggest race of the year, and it is surreal. It's painful to watch. Sometimes it's hard not to just laugh at the dark thing that you're watching. So I saw it and I couldn't believe that it was happening.
Yeah, the one that you sent it to me. The one that it reminded me of was the helicopter rescue there was like a grandma who had fallen in some hike or something. They went to pick her up in the I don't know if it's called a gurney or what it is, but it's the airlift orange thing. And for some reason, the cable gets spun and she starts spinning faster and faster and faster. And yeah, that hits my, I forget that there's a human in there, but I know that there's the idea of a human, and it just makes me cackle.
Yeah. She's okay. She came at no injuries. The thing I was thinking about is how this can't occur or hasn't occurred in other sports. This would be like someone running into the NBA finals and kicking LeBron in the knee. Like you can run on the court. You could even pop the basketball.
Yeah, no one's disrupted a game.
You know what I'm saying? But this is like
the
outcome of stage 1.
Yeah.
Someone got out ahead of it. Someone was unaffected, and that person now has a giant lead over all the people that got taken out.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating because for some people, for
a lot of
security. People, well, for a lot of people listening, they go, yeah, who cares? Tour de France. But that's someone's most important thing in their life.
Yeah.
And it just got ruined by a fan that wanted an Instagram photo. So it just was interesting.
Instagram's making the world a worse place, dude.
Well, I have always believed that.
Yeah, take away Instagram, that person does not engage in that behavior.
Well, maybe she was making a TikTok. Who knows?
Yeah, to be fair, would have been something. I have things that don't connect to that at all. Let me see.
It's all right. You see Charles Murray is making the rounds again?
That was one of the things I was going to say, yeah.
I was surprised. I thought that they had buried Charles Murray in the bay. I thought they put cement on his feet and gotten rid of him. So it's interesting to see he's circling around again.
I had never seen him before. That was one of the things that I was like, oh, I've literally never, he's kind of like Voldemort. So Charles Murray, for those of you who have not heard, and I have not read any of his books, is infamous, I think is the appropriate word, for talking about the connections between race and IQ. And according to him, that there is mean average differences across different races and different groups, which I believe like Ashkenazi Jews being at the far extreme high IQ. I don't know who's at the far extreme left, but he argues that the differences in outcome in America between whites and blacks and Asians, with Asians being farther to the right, whites being relatively in the middle of those three, and then blacks being to the left, can be somewhat, or I don't know if he says somewhat or largely attributed.
I think it's partially explained by differences in IQ.
And by differences in mean level IQ.
And what he says, there's a couple things he says. This doesn't mean that the highest IQ in America doesn't belong to a black guy. This is about the average of the whole group. And also, we haven't done research yet to know if this is genetic or if this is due to nutrition or if this is due to quality of education or if this is due to family. Yeah.
Is that his? So that seems to me, and again, I haven't read the research. It seems that IQ is so gameable. Like you can raise your IQ 20 points by preparing for the test.
Well, not 20 points, but you can also raise a kid's IQ by moving them from a impoverished neighborhood to a upper middle class neighborhood. They've done that study.
Yeah.
The thing I thought was most interesting about it is that my impression, which could have been wrong from before, was that we denied his result. We just said, this isn't true. Your research is bad. You're a racist. I think
a lot of people still do.
A
lot of that's still going around.
Well, I gave it a quick Google. I literally just found out that he was making the rounds again. So I gave it a quick Google. And it seems like the argument has changed to this may be true, but it doesn't prove that it's genetic, which is total. It's just, yeah.
Oh, I think that totally, is always, I think that's actually been the thing for a long time. These numbers are not indicative of a real world. There's no real world conclusion that could be drawn from these given. Well,
I thought, at least in my little circle of the world, the impression I got was Charles Murray's results were wrong, was the conclusion of the past. And it seemed to me like the dialogue shifted to his results don't say anything about genetics.
Yeah.
Which I was like, oh, that seems like a more measured response to him, actually. And I would have thought, if anything, it would have gone the opposite way, given the climate of today. So that was my biggest surprise.
Did you watch any of his podcasts or anything?
I watched him on Coleman Hughes, but they didn't really say much.
So I actually paid the $5 to get the whole thing on Coleman's.
Oh, okay. I only watched it on YouTube, and I didn't really have any interesting takeaways.
Yeah. Well, there's the disagreement. The Coleman says, look, it might be wrong, but I'm not going to take issue with the research because I'm not a statistician and I haven't deeply dug into the data. I'm going to assume, for the sake of this conversation, that this is done in good faith and accurately represents the truth. That this sample is useful. I still contend, from Coleman's perspective, that you are doing more harm by good than centering this conversation around race and IQ because of the downstream effects, because people aren't equipped to really understand the difference between mean, because the little kids are going to go into school and say, I heard on the news that you're not as smart as me, and that kid's going to go home and tell his parents, and the parents are going to have a fit, and it's just not a useful way to slice up the world and to discuss it. And then Charles responds, well, the nation is being accused of being systemically racist, and my data, according to me, shows that that's not the case, that there are expected outcome level changes that one would expect. So what am I to do? Like, we're mislabeling the problem here, so I have to do this. And then they don't necessarily come to a conclusion. I have an opinion on.
Well, the one thing I'm surprised, I'm surprised from Coleman, from what I've seen before, because if it is the case that on average a certain group is being affected by something, nutrition or school or whatever, I agree. Who cares? Like, you don't have to label it by race, but isn't it helpful to know that, because then you can focus on improving nutrition and school systems and stuff like that?
I come back to who cares of the skin color breakdown. Look, do kids have bad nutrition? They get the kids that have crappy nutrition.
This is what I'm saying.
Better nutrition. And I don't care if it's 80% black kids and 12% white kids and 8%, just if there's a problem with people in America, just help the people that have that problem.
Sure. But I think so let's say that a certain neighborhood has a lower than average IQ. Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. Yeah, you don't have to know the racial demographic of that neighborhood, but it's damaging to say that's not true. All neighborhoods have the same IQ. So like this neighborhood, and it's 90% white, it's 90% black, it's 90% Asian. Well, I don't care, but we should figure out why they have a lower than average IQ. Is it the school system doesn't have the funding it needs? Is it that the nutrition is bad? Is it that there's something? And then you can go basically like help the kids in that neighborhood.
Well, I tend to think I tend to think all the breakdowns by race are missing the point. And again, you'd have to run the data, but I suspect that you would find stronger correlations to economic.
Yes, I agree.
Like, just help the kids, particularly that do not have the support systems that allow them to flourish.
You definitely don't want a policy that goes into a school and helps kids only of a certain race, even though all of the kids have the same.
To me, whether it's coming from the woke left saying, "Hey, we need to, affirmative action this many kids into honors courses or into college," or it's coming from Charles Murray saying, "Hey, this explains it, and we don't need to do anything." I'm like, the study of it by race, in my opinion, makes for bad solutions. Because then you start doing what we did with this Joe Biden recovery program, which is now you're giving money to restaurant owners based on their skin color. And we had a long discussion about this. And I know someone around here who's a white guy who couldn't get any money. I know a guy who got a lot of money. He's an Asian guy. And I think he would tell you that he doesn't deserve it. He wouldn't tell you this, but he would say it privately.
Right.
that he doesn't deserve it. He would never come on the podcast and say this.
He has said it. He has said it.
Yes.
You'll never catch him saying it in recording.
That it's messed up and that...
he got more than he deserves.
You got a lot more than he deserves.
Yeah.
And that you would do it by race is just ridiculous.
Yeah, you just do it by need.
Not just by need. I think you would want to do it by need and by behavior, because like, look, there's people that will be in need forever and don't show a capability of taking what is given and then returning on that investment by becoming a more productive member of society. So I think that some combination of need and ROI is what you're looking for.
My only thing was it's weird to me that some people want to not talk about IQ differences across high school kids in different neighborhoods. And just, again, forget race, but it's like, why don't we figure out why this is happening?
Well, that's, I agree with Coleman on this. Like, just don't run the analysis by race and don't do the other analyses by race. And like, I also tend to think that what you're going to find, you're like, cops are killing black people. Like, cops are killing poor men. Forget the fact that they're men even. Like, you could throw that one out. I think that there's a lot of people come into these arguments with the three classes that they're most interested in. They're interested in men versus women. They're interested in typically black versus white. And then you mix in the other races that are also discussed. And they're interested in gay versus straight. And those are the three groups that they seem to think are most important. And I just pull my hair out going like, don't you think that economic class is or the income of your parents is a really important one to include in this. So I tend to agree with Coleman on this, that it's just not useful. But to your question of like, hey, wouldn't it be good to know why IQ differs amongst people? 100%.
Well, yeah, I think the big thing was at one point people were just denying the results. And if the study's done poorly, then it's done poorly. But if there are neighborhoods where people are testing lower and then have lower financial futures because of it, and if IQ is the thing, like Jordan Peterson says, that correlates the most with financial outcomes, then it seems like the natural conclusion would be, well, why don't we try to study how we can help raise the IQ of kids in areas that are depressed in terms of what you would expect the average IQ to be? Yeah,
this is the other thing that I don't know how they treat it, but one of the thoughts that I had is like, okay, like let's, this race is here, this race is here, this race is here. Like, why are we all, I don't think he is, but there seems to be an implicit understanding that this is the upper, like Ashkenazi Jews are maxed out. It's like, what if they could have an average IQ of 160? If they got baby Mozart and better schooling and grew up in a community and ate broccoli 3 times a day. Like, I am at the impression that the human lifespan and human intelligence are nowhere near maximized given how we raise ourselves and our kids and how we take care of ourselves. So it's like the relative falling of it in any particular year is uninteresting to me. I'm interested in potential while also recognizing that not everyone, like this seems to be a fair conclusion of the IQ studies, is capable of the same potential. But that you could move the human mean considerably such that it's almost like, why would we run this analysis now? Like, let's push it up a lot. What was the average IQ 100 years ago? I'd be willing to bet if you gave them a standardized Stanford Binet or whatever IQ test, be a lot lower. And I expect it's going to be, hopefully, if things go well, a lot higher in another 100 years. So let's just move the whole thing up.
Well, I think what holds it back, as I'm reflecting on it, is potentially a fear that some of it is genetic. And people don't want that to be the case. So they don't want to run any tests where that could be the outcome. So then it's like, well, how do we study what the cause is if we don't want to study what the cause is? You know what I'm saying? Like, because I think that the thing that is helpful is to know what contributes to this and what variables are in our control and how can we improve those variables. But I think some people are just scared to run the test.
Yeah. I guess, and this is, I know a lot of people particularly on the left disagree with me, but one of the variables I'm just not interested in is by race. I'm not interested in running almost any of these things by race. I go, the overly simplified example, which I understand that it doesn't have the same historical context. You could do eye color or hair color. Like, I'm just not interested in those cuts of the data. If there's people on the bottom find out if it's possible to help those people on the bottom. If it disproportionately helps people of one race, I don't care. We should be focusing our attention on high ROI, high need. And that is it. And there shouldn't be another confounding variable of skin color. That's my sense of it. So I was, I guess, with Coleman on that shakedown. Anything else you want to add?
No. I just think it's, I mean, weirdly enough, I almost think the people that, and you're saying remove it completely, but I think the fear is that they'll go into these areas and they'll run a bunch of tests and then they'll find out it's genetic. And the people who have that fear basically have a racist fear almost. Whereas if you went in and you said, I actually think this is almost all nurture, then you wouldn't be afraid to try to figure out what's causing depressed IQ averages. Because you just go, oh yeah, I know this is going to come down to nutrition and teaching and stuff like this, so let's just do it. So it's funny because I almost feel like there's like a...
Well, it's tough. I mean, man, I don't even know how one would study that. It's like, okay, we're going to take a group of kids that are like in super poor neighborhoods and don't have good mentors, and we're going to give them really good food. Like, how does one even do that? And, what do you know? Like, dropping out to be a drug dealer because there's no other economic opportunity, despite the fact that you've had really good vegetables your whole life, isn't enough. Like, I think it's a tough test to run.
Sure.
Is it diet, for instance? It's tough to hold that constant compared to other variables. And it seems that we broadly know that it's like loving communities and families, opportunities that don't make you run afoul of the law, a focus culturally or intrinsically on tests and studying, because if you don't care, you're not going to do it. I imagine. Yeah,
having the time to focus on studying.
Yeah,
because you don't have to work
or worry about where you're going to eat or all that kind of stuff. It's like I wonder what would happen if you went to. I'm sure. I guess these might exist. Yeah, the poorest countries of whatever race, of each race, and then ran an IQ test. I think you'd find like, oh my gosh, the average is less than when you're really developed. So it just seems to increase the level of development around the world, and in the U.S. would be the obvious policy solution. But maybe I'm oversimplifying things. I don't know. Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.